Hey guys, my name is Gabrielle Robinson.
And my name is Vanessa Liu, and we're your co-hosts for the Life Unfiltered podcast.
Today we have a special guest straight from Troy Athens High School, Miss Nagi. We are so thrilled to have you.
And this episode is going to be specifically about mental health and burnout because that is a prevalent issue in high schools, especially with like exams, midterms, AP testing. Burnout is a big issue within students at high school. So we're excited to have you, Miss Nagi. Let's introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you both for having me. So my name is Miss Nagi. I am a counselor at Athens right now. I have been a counselor for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was an English teacher at Athens for about 11 years. I taught 9th grade English, 10th grade English, 11 AP, so I've quite literally taught most grade levels. I've seen a variety of different students, different stress levels, different requirements on their plate. So I have some pretty solid firsthand knowledge of what burnout looks like with students. And also now as a counselor, I am tasked with a great privilege helping those students cope with their burnout.
Okay.
So how can we reach out? Like, how can students reach out and find you in Athens?
That is an excellent question. First and foremost, so at Athens, every student has an assigned counselor based off of their last name. So we are categorized based on alpha. We have at Athens an open door policy, so students can stop by anytime to speak with any counselor if they would like. But if they really want to set up more of like a formal appointment, then Schoology messaging their counselor is always our biggest encouragement, or sending an email. But open door policy, if you are in need, if you are stressed, if you need a break, you come on down to the office and someone will help you out.
That's amazing. We have that resource.
Yeah. So thankful for you.
Oh, Gabby's my student on my caseload too. So hopefully, I'm getting good ratings from her.
Yes. So Nessa, I know you have had experiences with burnout. So do you want to share some of your personal experiences?
Yeah. So I know I dealt with a burnout at the end of my junior year of high school. And you hear that a lot. Your junior year is being the most stressful. You're taking the most AP classes, SAT prepping. And I kind of thought I wouldn't be that burned out. I took 4 AP classes. I was doing like AP chemistry, AP environmental science, and like all these different APs. And my non-APs were also hard classes like GBBE and honors pre-calc. So my entire schedule was just filled up with these like advanced classes, and I had no room to I didn't have any free time for myself. So that's when I realized like I really couldn't do everything. And it was kind of like a reality check my junior year, because before then I thought I could, manage everything I could. I could do all these classes. I could do my sport. I could do these extracurricular activities. But junior year was really like a slap in the face. And it was like, you really can't handle everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's difficult, and that's something that quite a few students go through, especially junior year, because on top of that, you have state testing, you have college preparation in the back of your mind. So I always see that with students at junior year is pretty tough. It's a tough realization sometimes. When you're burnout, you can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel like also as like when you're ending junior year and you're starting senior year, like the first week you just like it's just thrown at you like college, and it's like kind of scary and like overwhelming. So yeah. How would you like tell students to prepare for the first week of senior year and like going into college and all that?
Ooh, so that first week of senior year, well, I think senior year in general is really important to make sure that you're still focused on your goal. I think I see a lot of students who get very focused on trying to get into one specific college. And if that doesn't work out for them, they internalize failure. And that's like a huge detriment to them, especially for how hard you work for 12 years of schooling. So I think for me, I always try to encourage students to focus on your goals, focus on what's important to you, make sure you still include balance in your senior schedule, making sure that you're still cognizant and reframing some of those negative thoughts to remember that your post-secondary plans are going to align. And you're going to find yourself on a path that is meant for you. I cannot tell you how many students I come back, former graduated students, who come back and they say, I love what I'm doing. I love where I'm at. And I've never once had a student come back and tell me, I absolutely hate my school. Even though they were a student who thought they might not have been going down one specific path, or they wanted to get into a different school and they were rejected from it, their path finds its way. So I think the biggest thing is just trying to encourage yourself to believe that in the next couple months you're going to be on a path that's right for you, and that it might not be linear and it might not be what you think it is going to be now, but you're going to find your way.
And then you mentioned like something about school life balance in your senior year. What do you think that looks like?
So in terms of what that would look like, in my opinion, is not overburdening yourself with advanced courses and extracurricular commitments. And I think part of the burnout that takes place is because sometimes you don't even realize you are getting burnt out until you are at the end of your rope and you are like, I cannot do this anymore, and you're maxed out. So I think part of recognizing that balance is learning when to say no and learning how to set boundaries for yourself. And that's really hard to do, especially if you're somebody who is a chronic people pleaser, especially if you are someone who is used to being overscheduled, or you're an overachiever and you lean into perfectionism. That's really hard, but that's where the reality of where a lot of us are. So I think, I always encourage students to take AP classes your senior year that you're interested in, that are going to stimulate your mind, that you're going to find engaging so it doesn't feel burdensome to you. And of course, like what's important to you. If you want to have a job after school, can you manage that with your course load as well as clubs or sports? I think just prioritizing the things that you really want to do that bring you joy and make you happy. Because now getting into college anymore, it's not, if I have a 4.0 and I have this test score and I took this many APs, I'm in no matter what. Like it's not like that anymore.
Right.
So you need to do what makes you happy and find balance, because you're going to end up at a school that is right for you and that's a good fit based on who you are. That's what I'd say.
So given that, what are some signs of like burnout in high school?
So some signs, burnout is essentially our body's response to overstimulation, right? We're overstressed, we're overworked, our anxiety is reaching capacity. And so physically, that might look like more irritability, inability to sleep or focus. Maybe you're leaning into more unhealthy eating patterns. Maybe you're coping with substance use. Maybe you're coping in other unhealthy ways. But physically, normally that's kind of the big focuses, right? Mentally, I think experiencing a heightened level of anxiety, of depression, those feelings and symptoms associated with both of those mental health conditions, you're going to notice both of those as well too. And like I said, I think sometimes you don't even realize you're burning out until it's just happened all at once and you've dug yourself into this hole that you might feel is really hard to get out of.
Yeah. I know for me, with my own personal experience, it was so hard to get up in the morning for school. It was hard to just have that motivation to do schoolwork or do assignments. And that's just how I knew I was burnt out, because I really had no motivation to do anything anymore.
Totally. And that's where I think some of those depressive symptoms come into play. Depression, anxiety, it's a spectrum. Any type of a mental health condition is a spectrum. And how people experience it and how our brain processes it is different for everybody. But lack of motivation or like abjectivity, apathy, absolutely. Those are all huge signs and symptoms of burnout. Also, avoidance as a coping mechanism. Many students that I work with, I think, lean into avoidance-based coping skills as opposed to, wanting to address the problem. They just maybe assume that if I don't go to school or if I just don't do this assignment, that it's going to benefit me. Maybe immediately it does. You bring levity to that moment, but in the long run, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like as high schoolers, it's hard for people to know when to reach out and to say like what they want to say to their teacher and like saying they're struggling. How would you what advice would you give to a student that's feeling a little overwhelmed with classes and how to effectively communicate with their teacher?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of shame associated with admitting that maybe you can't handle everything on your plate, especially where, being teenagers and even just human nature, right? We like to compare ourselves to our peers. High school, this is the time in your life where you're going to be in like this little microcosmic world where you're just consistently comparing yourselves to other people. And that shame that we might feel when we see this person in class who has 5 or 6 APs. They do all this volunteer work. They started a nonprofit. They're donating their blood. You know, they're like going overseas and supporting like, you know, nonprofit work. And you're like, how though?
Yeah.
So I think one, the detriment or the first step would be acknowledging that you need some support. And I think rejecting an internalization of shame, you know, like, and rejecting, like vehemently rejecting the internalization of failure. Because I do think that our minds automatically go to, I knew I couldn't do this. Who was I kidding? You know, I'm a failure. I knew I couldn't do this. So I think right there, you not being your own worst enemy is like the first step. And then 2, reaching out to just any trusted adult. You know, if you feel like your counselor might be the person to talk to, or there's a teacher or a parent or like an older family member, just someone that you can confide in who can help you and support you on that path, I think is huge.
That's good. So you kind of already talked about this, but what do you think, like, how does burnout affect the mental and physical health of students?
Burnout, in my opinion, I mean, it's associated with increased anxiety and depression. I think when you're engaging in unhealthy habits, that can all roll into one, right? And so if you're a student who you're feeling overwhelmed and you feel like avoidance is how you're going to cope, then obviously that can lead to an increased sense of anxiety when you have to return to the classroom after a long period of an absence. So right there, just an increased level of anxiety. I think the internalization of like shame or fear or failure can lead to depressive symptoms and thoughts. And again, that's a spectrum, right? But sometimes if we don't seek help and our depression goes untreated chemically, that can turn into suicidal ideation, and we can be concerned about harming ourselves. So I think both of those two right there are some end results of burnout, maybe more towards like the severe side, but definitely, you know, withdrawing from family and friends, drawing more into yourself, self-isolation, all of that can lead to those depressive symptoms.
Yeah, so our last episode was about social media and how that can like affect your mental health with procrastination and comparison. So how do you think social media plays a role with burnout and student mental health?
Ooh, social media. I mean, social media is both a gift and a curse, right? Social media is a highlight reel. So of course, your peers are going to be flooding your feed with all of the things they're doing, right? And everything positive that they're doing. Is anybody posting a picture of themselves when they're stressed out studying for a test at 3 a.m. and crying? Probably not, right? If they do, that's a call for help and they need some support. But typically, in my experiences, it's a highlight reel of all of the amazing things I'm doing, which forces us to question ourselves. And how come I'm not doing as much as they're doing? So I think social media in that regard, if you're experiencing some burnout, it's best to take a break. Take a break from social media, do something that is going to help you cope in a more positive way that's not going to encourage peer similarities, and it's not going to encourage you to want to like go down that rabbit hole and just feel bad for yourself.
Right.
So definitely taking a break. Social media break, 100%. Sometimes I tell students delete the app off your phone because you'll still have the account, but it just that extra step of having to log into your account, right? Like sometimes that right there is like, no, I'm too lazy to do that.
Right.
So like delete the app off your phone, or, you know, like put a timer on your phone if you want to go on it, only spend 10 minutes on it, whatever you need to do to protect your peace. That's really what it's about.
Yeah, 100%. So do you have like any ways that students can effectively manage their time to reduce stress and avoid burnout?
Time management. So I think the largest thing is one, not overscheduling yourself, right? And like setting some boundaries for yourself, learning to say no, I think is huge, you know, especially when it comes to extracurriculars. Of course, I can join 20 clubs. Why not? And then when all those clubs have a meeting on the same day, or you said yes to do this and this and this and this, plus homework, plus a job. I mean, it's just so much. So I think one, being realistic with yourself about a schedule, you know, and being realistic with yourself about how much you're willing to commit to. And priorities, you know, like I encourage students, make a list. What is at the top of your list? Like, what is most important to you? Is it your AP classes that are most important to you? Or are you really committed to student government and that's where you want to give your 100%? Like, what is it? Or your sport, you know, if you're an athlete, is that where you want to give your 100%? And there's no shame in either way. You know, just recognizing what's important to you. So I think first and foremost, definitely, you know, organizing your priorities, setting some boundaries, and then as you're working through time management, making sure that you are consciously organizing your time. So if you decide I'm going to go home after school, I'm going to take a break, set a timer for yourself for your break or do something that's going to fill your cup, so to speak, and then decide if you would like to do my homework now, after dinner, you know, just kind of being like really conscientious with your time. And I know that sounds silly, but I think the more intentional we can be, the more we get into a pattern and a practice that just kind of becomes routine.
Yeah. Something I really look up to Gabby is how she has the weekend dedicated to herself. Like she doesn't like overbook herself. She has like time for herself to free up space just to, you know, get that break over the weekend. And I really like that about her because I like try to plan some podcast things where I plan like other school related activities with her and she's like, no, this is like time for me. And that's something I really like look up to.
Thank you.
Good for you. Yeah.
Between like the podcast, which I love, like it's so fun, and then like other clubs and meetings and all that throughout the week, which I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity to be part of. It's just like I feel like by Friday I'm like, you know, I need a reset. So that's why like on the weekend it's either like me or just no school related things.
Good for you.
So
and that's about setting those boundaries. And I think if your friend asks you to do something, it's okay to respectfully say, this weekend I have plans to do this, but I'd love to reconnect and put a different date on the calendar.
Right.
You know, it's okay to set the boundary. And if your friend is your friend, they'll respect your boundary.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's hard to stick to that because we do want to accommodate as much as we can, but it's important to set the boundary.
100%. Do you have any examples of how you time manage or balance your work and life balance?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm in a different position than you guys, obviously being high schoolers. 6 classes out of the day plus extracurriculars and everything else is a lot. It's a lot on your plate. For me personally, I was burnt out with teaching. I mean, I found myself in a position, that's why one of the reasons I made a move to a counseling position is because the expectations of teaching is a lot. It's one of those jobs. And for me, I have 3 young children, so it was hard for me to justify giving up my time with my kids to do my job. Because my opinion is life is meant to be lived and enjoyed, and work is work. A job is, I'm sorry, Troy School District, I love you. Please don't fire me. I really like being employed. I just realized what I was saying. But work is work. And I mean, we live in America. We are a very industrialized society. If I quit this job today, they would find someone to take my place. So what matters to me are the people in my life who love me, the people I love, the things that bring me joy. And so I was in a position where I absolutely loved teaching and I loved my students, but at what cost? So I think that's a question to ask yourself when you are feeling burned out. Like, what's the cost of me taking all these AP classes and these extracurriculars, and at what cost is my mental health going to suffer, or my physical health? So for me, I try to do my best to leave work at work. I leave at a certain time every day to pick up my daughter, and then I'm kind of like in mom mode, so to speak. And on the weekends, some things for myself that I always say is I always want to do an activity with my family, and I want to do some type of a, you know, like a date night or whatnot with my husband or see my friends. I always try to,
Cute, I love that.
I never thought I'd be that middle-aged woman doing date nights, but hey, here we are.
I think that's so important, though, to have that like, connection with your family, because family is really important.
For sure. And that goes back to my point of like intentionality, you know, like making sure you're scheduling time for yourself, your friends, your family, the people that are important to you. The more intentional we can be with the time we spend with people and who we choose to give our time to and our energy to, who or what, I think that can help us to not burn ourselves out.
Right.
Yeah.
And then even further, like you were talking about how you were a teacher. Do you think that when you were teaching that you knew when to intervene if a student was like experiencing burnout? And if you did, were you at like in a space like, what do I say? Or did you like help?
Yes and no, because in the classroom, you see sometimes just maybe one version of a student, whereas I think now in my position, I'm seeing a dynamic view of students. I don't always see them in the academic setting because sometimes in the classroom, students tend to be maybe a little bit more apprehensive about sharing their emotions or like their struggles, so to speak. But I like to think I was a pretty understanding teacher. So if students came to me and asked me, hey, Miss Nagi, can I have an extension on this? Can I turn this in at a later time? Yeah, sure, no problem. So I think as a teacher, having flexible policies, building in some flexibility for your students is huge. I think it speaks volumes and it goes a long way with building those relationships and maintaining those relationships with your students.
That's good.
So we have one more question for you. How do mental health issues such as anxiety or depression overlap with burnout in students, and how can they be distinguished?
I don't know if they really can't be distinguished because I think burnout can become or manifest or present very much like anxiety and depression. I think burnout is a colloquial term, if you will, that we've kind of coined and used more conversationally that we're comfortable with. But the symptoms associated with burnout is anxiety and depression, really. And I praise your generation and you guys for having these types of conversations to be open about it. Because like I said, I do feel like there's a lot of shame still associated with mental health. And sometimes students don't know who to talk to or where to go for help. And I just think having the conversation and talking about our mental health and the factors associated with our mental health is a huge step.
Okay.
Yeah.
As like a counselor at Troy Athens High School, how do you think we can make the stigma lessen and to normalize talking about mental health? How do you think we can make a more comfortable atmosphere for students to talk about their feelings?
Things like this, a podcast, just having open conversation and dialogue, I think is huge. Raising more awareness of what people are experiencing and how they're experiencing it, being more honest and authentic and open when you're having conversations with students. I think that the trusted adults in our building showing vulnerability or even explaining to their students like, hey guys, let's have a free Friday. I know you're stressed out. It's that time of the year. Let's have a free Friday. So I think just little things like that we can build in intentionally is very helpful. But also making sure that students have access to mental health supports. So counselors or, extra resources, knowing who to contact if they want to seek community therapy or any type of community mental health resources. I think all of that is huge in just making sure that students feel supported.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have any lasting words or advice to our listeners out there?
I think that my lasting advice and words would be to take care of yourself. I think it would be to practice self-care, practice balance. I know that we're sometimes working for these goals that feel so huge and weighty, but I would really encourage students to assess at what cost. I think that it's important to be mindful of who you are, the people that care about you, who you care about, and just focus it on what makes you happy. That's really what I would hope people take away.
And then obviously like high school has changed a lot over the years. How would you say like as an adult that is not in high school right now, how to be like more understanding to the kids now and like be more reasonable with their schedules?
Sure. Empathy. I think empathy is huge. I think we are living in a precarious time currently, politically, socially, environmentally, economically. And I think just recognizing and remembering that, we're all human. We all belong to each other, regardless of our differences. We all love and feel the same way, and we all want to lead a life that makes us happy. So just like being mindful of that we all are humans and that people sometimes struggle in different ways and maybe process things in different ways and cope in different ways. There's no formula or model of what a student should look like if they're experiencing burnout, or this is what a successful student looks like. Everybody is different and processes things differently. We need to meet students where they are and help them based on where they are.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Ms. Nagi, for
you
your
guys.
insight.
Yeah. I might get fired after this since I just, TSD. I don't know.
We love these conversations. We love them.
Yeah, what you guys are doing is really cool. So I appreciate that you're creating a venue and a space you're holding space for students just to think about these issues, have real conversation and process it. And I hope that it impacts somebody.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
I know it impacted me. I needed to hear some of those words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like locked in when you were I was like, okay.
Yes, So we hope our listeners were able to take something away from this podcast. Thank you again so much, Ms. Nagi.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And if you guys want to stream, we are on YouTube, Spotify at life.unfilteredpod, and also follow us on our Instagram.
And don't forget the Google form in our bio. And if you want advice or any topics that you want us to bring up, or even if you want to be a guest, it's in our Instagram bio and it's linked under the Google form. And please remember to leave your name, because a lot of people did not leave their name. We don't know how to reach out to you.
Exactly. So awesome. Thank you guys so much again. Thank you, Ms. Nagi, once again.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for our listeners for tuning in on this week's episode.
We're your co-hosts,
Vanessa Liu
and Gabrielle Robinson.
And always remember to embrace the mess and live life unfiltered. Bye, guys!